The Prairie Lantern Motel was supposed to have 18 rooms. On my first morning running it, the booking system showed 17. Rooms 1 through 16 were there. Room 18 was there. Room 17 was not. Gordon, the maintenance man, told me Harold had taken it out of service 7 or 8 years earlier and told everyone to leave it alone. Then I found the door painted the same beige as the hallway wall, the number plate gone, and an old brass key tagged 17 in the front desk drawer. At 59, I had taken over a motel that was preparing to close. I did not need a mystery. I needed to know why one room had been taught to disappear. The Prairie Lantern sat on the edge of Medicine Hat, Alberta, close enough to the Trans-Canada Highway that truck noise became part of the building after dark. The parking lot was cracked. Part of the roadside sign had stopped lighting properly. The lobby drawers were packed with old registration slips, repair receipts, and keys from before most active rooms were converted to electronic cards. I had been checking the property summary against the booking system when the numbers failed to match. 18 rooms on paper, 17 rentable. I walked the west hallway myself. 15, 16, then a stretch of beige wall. 18. Only when I stood closer could I see the outline of a door between 16 and 18. Someone had painted it to match the wall. The brass lock set was still there, but the room number plate had been removed. Gordon Pike, 64, stood several steps behind me with his worn toolbox. He had maintained the property for years. "Where is room 17?" I asked. "Still there. Why isn't it in the system?" He rubbed his thumb along the toolbox handle. Harold took it out of service. "For what?" "Water problem, I think. Long time ago. And it never reopened." "No." His answer carried no fear and no guilt, only fatigue. That bothered me more because it sounded like a problem everyone had learned to step around. Back at the front desk, I found the old brass key under faded registration slips. The scratched oval tag read 17. Gordon sighed when he saw it. So that's where he left it. I slipped it into my cardigan pocket but did not use it. Then I noticed the fire evacuation map beside the lobby door. The plastic cover had yellowed, but the plan was clear. 15, 16, 17, 18. Room 17 had not been converted to storage or removed by renovation. It was still part of the motel. I had taken operational control less than a week earlier under a lease-to-own agreement. Before I opened a room with an unclear history, I wanted to know what the agreement allowed, what my insurer expected, and what records existed. Experience had taught me that a locked door was rarely the actual problem. What worried me was the habit behind it. I had not taken over the Prairie Lantern because owning a motel had been a lifelong dream. 4 months earlier, a hotel in Calgary had eliminated the position I had held after 25 years in hospitality. I had worked front desk, night audit, bookkeeping, and assistant management. I knew occupancy reports, guest recovery, payroll schedules, and the exact tone a building makes before a small maintenance issue becomes expensive. New ownership arrived with self-check-in kiosks, new scheduling software, and a plan to reduce management costs. Nobody called me too old. They used phrases like operational restructuring and reduced overlap. A regional manager thanked me for being valuable during the transition. 25 years became 4 careful words and a severance package. For 2 weeks after leaving, I still woke at 5:20 every morning because my body expected an occupancy report before 6. By the 4th week, I stopped setting an alarm. That frightened me more than the job loss. My daughter suggested I take a year off. She meant it kindly. What I heard was that my useful years might already be behind me. Then I saw the Prairie Lantern listing. 18 rooms, highway access, declining occupancy, owner retiring. The photographs showed dated carpet, cracked asphalt, and a sign that looked tired before sunset. I drove to Medicine Hat, expecting to confirm that taking it on would be foolish. Instead, I noticed work trucks in the parking lot, 2 out-of-province plates, and steady highway traffic. The building looked tired, the location did not. Harold Bennett, 72, had owned it almost 30 years. He did not pretend the business was healthy. The roof needed work. 2 air conditioners needed replacement. Bookings were down. He had stopped accepting reservations beyond Labor Day because he planned to close if he could not find someone to operate the place. We spent nearly 3 hours on utilities, payroll, repeat guests, occupancy, and the purchase structure. The numbers were weak, but not hopeless. I would not risk most of my remaining savings on an outright purchase, so we negotiated a lease-to-own arrangement with a limited initial cash commitment and enough reserve left to operate. That mattered. I was taking a measured risk, not proving courage with my housing money. Now, with the Room 17 key in my pocket, I opened old occupancy reports. I found the month the room disappeared from rentable inventory. 3 months later, overall occupancy began to slide. I did not assume one caused the other, but patterns deserved attention. Something about that period had changed how the motel was being run. The next morning, I arrived before 6 and pulled the old maintenance binder from the cabinet behind the desk. Hotels leave footprints. A leaking tap creates a work order. A carpet replacement creates an invoice. A guest complaint leaves a note, even if nobody wants to remember it later. The binder showed ordinary repairs in rooms 14 and 18, an ice machine service call, and several plumbing entries. Then, the dates around room 17 simply went quiet. No completed work order explaining why it had been removed from service. No storage conversion. No reopening inspection. I went to the laundry room and asked Maya Singh, who had worked housekeeping at the motel for 11 years, what she remembered. Her hands slowed over a stack of towels. There was a smell. What kind? Wet drywall, worse after rain. A contractor had come one evening. They worked late. The room never reopened. That was all she knew. Back at the desk, an email arrived from a highway maintenance company asking about weekly rates for 6 workers for roughly 7 weeks later that month. For an 18-room motel heading into autumn, 6 steady rooms mattered. I flagged the message and kept digging. At the bottom of an old file box, I found a photocopied invoice dated 8 years earlier. Exterior envelope repair, rooms 15 through 18, paid. I carried it to Gordon. He looked at the paper, then toward the West Hall. Harold paid for work back there. Then why didn't 17 reopen? I don't know everything that happened. I know the room stayed closed, and after a while, we stopped asking. I asked whether anyone had noticed problems in 16 or 18 since then. Gordon remembered repainting a small stain in 18, 2 winters earlier, but could not say where it came from. Maya remembered moving one guest from 16 after a musty complaint during a spring storm. Neither incident had been connected formally to room 17. I wrote both down without turning memories into facts. Before leaving, I checked the lease-to-own agreement. Operational control covered the whole property, but the schedule of known deficiencies Harold disclosed before signing listed the roof, sign, 2 air conditioners, and several cosmetic items. Room 17 was not there. Neither was unresolved water intrusion. I called my insurance broker and described exactly what I had found. She told me to photograph the condition before disturbing anything and use a qualified inspector. That changed the next step. I no longer had a mysterious key asking to be turned. I had an undocumented building issue that needed to be handled like one. The following morning, I photographed the west hallway, the painted door, the tarnished lock, and the scratched key tag before I touched anything. Gordon stood 3 steps behind me. Maya stayed farther down the corridor. I turned the brass key gently. The lock resisted, then moved. The door dragged against the old carpet as it opened. Damp drywall and stale air reached us first. The room itself was disappointingly ordinary. Missing mattress, dusty furniture, closed curtains, an old lampshade leaning sideways. The exterior wall was a slightly different shade from the rest of the room. A baseboard near one corner had swollen. A patch of carpet did not quite match. Near the closet was a screwed access panel that looked newer than the wall around it. I did not open it. 25 years in hotels had taught me that knowing when to stop touching something was part of knowing what you were doing. I called an independent building envelope inspector named Noah Chen. By that afternoon, his moisture meter was climbing along the patched wall. He checked the hallway side, then went outside to examine the west exterior. This is active moisture intrusion, or recent enough that the wall is still carrying it, he said. I would not rent this room, and I would test the rooms beside it before assuming they are clear. The next inspection stage cost more than I wanted to spend in my first week. I authorized it anyway. Noah returned the next morning with an inspection camera and opened the access area properly. Behind it, the insulation was dark and compressed. Readings rose toward the upper exterior joint. Rooms 16 and 18 also showed elevated moisture. How many rooms do I lose? I asked. 16, 17, and 18 for sure. Possibly 15, temporarily, if the corridor needs to be opened and protected. In a large hotel, 4 rooms would have been an inconvenience. At the Prairie Lantern, 4 rooms were nearly a quarter of the inventory. His preliminary estimate was bad enough. The lost revenue frightened me more. My operating reserve could carry one serious problem. It could not comfortably carry repairs, lost rooms, normal surprises, and a weak autumn at the same time. Then, the highway company confirmed it still wanted 6 rooms for 7 weeks and needed a final answer within 10 days. I had spent days wanting the truth about room 17. Now I knew enough to see what the truth might cost. I asked Noah the question I did not want to hear myself ask. What if I leave 17 closed, patch what we can see in 16 and 18, take the crew booking, and do the full repair after winter? He did not look shocked. You could. I waited. But now you know there is active moisture behind the wall. If you carry it forward, that becomes a decision, not an unknown. He did not need to say more. Someone before me had already made that decision. I was still sitting behind the desk with the estimate, the old invoice, and the highway company's email when Harold came through the lobby door. He saw the plastic sheeting in the west hall and the report on my desk. You opened it. Yes. His irritation faded almost immediately into exhaustion. You should have left that room alone. I slid the report toward him. Why? Harold admitted the original leak had followed a hard freeze and heavy rain 8 years earlier. Room 17 took the worst of it. 16 and 18 showed staining. He hired a contractor. The first scope covered rooms 15 through 18. Then the wall opened wider, the estimate grew, and the Prairie Lantern was already under pressure. A fuel service contract had ended. Newer highway motels were discounting rooms. His line of credit was nearly full. So you stopped the repair. I told myself I postponed it. For 8 years? He looked toward the hallway. The wall dried. Nothing looked urgent. Then the sign needed work. Then the roof. Then carpet. You fix what the guest can see and tell yourself you'll get to the rest next season. Repeat guests began noticing small things. Stale smells, maintenance that took longer, lights left broken too long. Lower occupancy meant less cash. Less cash made the next delay easier. Room 17 had not caused the Prairie Lantern's decline. It had been the first serious problem Harold learned to work around. His proposed solution, was the same one I had just asked Noah about. Close 17 again, patch the neighbouring rooms, take the highway crew, and repair properly after winter. For one dangerous minute, it sounded sensible. Then my insurance broker called about Noah's report. She told me documented repairs could be managed, but confirmed active moisture left untreated would materially change the risk. When I returned to the lobby, Harold asked what I had decided. "I'm fixing it." His shoulders dropped. "You could lose the motel, maybe. But if I lose it, I'm not going to lose it by repeating the decision that helped put it here. I had decided what I would not do. Now I had to make doing the right thing financially possible. I stopped treating the repair as one impossible number and divided it into 5 decisions: repair cost, lost room revenue, cash reserve, crew booking, and purchase terms. I collected 3 estimates. The cheapest plan would close 16, 17, and 18 for nearly 3 weeks and limit how much of the wall was exposed for inspection. The more thorough option would open part of the corridor and temporarily remove 15 too. I chose the thorough one because the point was not to make the wall look repaired. I needed to know the water path was corrected. The contractor agreed to milestone billing instead of one large deposit. Gordon offered to handle permitted demolition and cleanup under the contractor's direction. "I can stay late," he said. "You can. And you'll be paid." He frowned. "I've been here 15 years. Then you should know what unpaid loyalty turns into." That earned a small smile. Maya rebuilt housekeeping around the rooms we could keep open and helped move supplies away from the west wing before protective sheeting went up. I called Ben Collins, the highway maintenance coordinator. I told him I could still give his crew 6 rooms on the opposite side of the property, but there would be daytime construction noise during part of the stay. I could have minimized it. Instead, I told him what was being repaired, when the work would happen, and which rooms were separated from it. I offered early coffee, twice-weekly laundry, and meal vouchers at the diner across the highway. "I'll take it to the supervisor," he said. Not yes, not no. The harder conversation was with Harold. The lawyer who had reviewed my lease-to-own agreement pointed me back to the disclosed deficiencies schedule. Room 17 and unresolved moisture were not listed. Harold said he had believed the old work had contained the problem. I reminded him that he also knew the repair had never been completed. I asked for a repair credit against the eventual purchase balance and a 2-month extension on the next scheduled purchase payment. He refused. We went back and forth until afternoon light faded against the lobby windows. In the end, he agreed to a smaller written credit and the full 2-month extension. It did not make the repair affordable in the comfortable sense. It made the cash flow possible. Work began Wednesday. By noon, 1 guest checked out because of drilling. By 3, another booking cancelled. I refunded one night and watched my reserve fall below the number I had promised myself to protect. Then Ben called. "We'll take the 6 rooms, 2-week trial. If the crew can work with the noise, we stay all 7. I looked toward the west corridor. I finally had a plan. What I did not have was much room left for it to fail. Ben's crew arrived before sunrise the following Monday. 6 men in reflective jackets carrying thermoses and duffel bags. I showed them the rooms farthest from the west wing. The rooms were clean, the nighttime side of the property was quiet, and their parking was away from the contractor area. None of it made the Prairie Lantern impressive. It made the arrangement workable. The first week still hurt. A couple from Regina checked out early. Another guest asked for a construction discount. 2 online reviews mentioned plastic sheeting and drilling. I answered both without pretending the work was invisible. West wing repairs were underway, affected rooms were closed, and guests who preferred a quieter stay could contact the desk before arrival. The repair invoices arrived on schedule whether rooms sold or not. My reserve slipped below the figure I had once considered the minimum safe number. I stopped checking that number every hour and started checking what it was for. A reserve was not a museum piece. It existed to absorb a problem without forcing a worse decision. The highway crew helped, but it did not erase the cancellations or repair costs. Gordon helped the contractor document each stage. Maya shifted housekeeping times so carts never blocked the protected corridor. I moved one long-term guest away from the west side before she had to ask. On the fourth afternoon, Noah returned after the wall behind room 17 had been opened. The damaged insulation was gone. Old water staining marked the sheathing. One section of framing needed repair, but the structure was sound. The source was an upper exterior joint that had never been fully corrected during the earlier work. Visible interior damage had been covered, and part of the exterior had been addressed, but water still found a path behind the wall when weather pushed hard against that side of the building. Harold came by later. This time, he called first. I invited him down the hall. He stood in the doorway of 17 and looked at the exposed wall for a long time. I kept thinking closing one door would make the problem smaller. It only made the problem quieter. He nodded. No defense, no argument. Then he asked whether I regretted taking over the motel. I looked past him toward the lobby, where 2 crew members were carrying coffee to their rooms. Ask me when the wall is closed. He almost smiled. The repair was not finished. Neither was the question. The repairs took 12 more days. Room 15 reopened first, once the contractor no longer needed corridor access for equipment and dust control. That gave me 1 room back before the most expensive work was finished. The highway crew completed its 2-week trial and extended through all 7 weeks. Ben came to the desk with the company card and asked for one change. Coffee earlier. How early? 5:30. I laughed. That I can fix without opening a wall. We moved the lobby coffee setup forward by 45 minutes and added a thermos for the days the crew left before dawn. Small adjustments mattered because I had spent too many weeks dealing with the kind that required estimates and plastic sheeting. When the exterior joint was rebuilt and sealed, Noah returned for a documented final inspection. He checked the repaired section from inside and outside, took moisture readings, then had the contractor run water over the exterior connection while the wall cavity remained visible. Nothing came through. He waited and tested again. Still dry. I asked him to put the results, photographs, and repair scope into the property file before any finish work covered the wall. If someone managed the Prairie Lantern after me, I wanted them to know what had happened without needing an old key and a suspicious question. Room 16 reopened after its wall and finish work passed inspection. Room 18 followed. Room 17 came last. New insulation, new drywall, proper exterior ceiling, fresh paint, new flooring, an ordinary mattress and furniture chosen because the room needed to function, not because I wanted a grand reveal. Before housekeeping made the bed, I stood alone inside. Gordon appeared at the door carrying the old brass key. "Still works," he said. "Not for long. We had already ordered an electronic lock to match the rest of the active rooms." He looked around. 8 years for a room to become boring again. Boring is good in a motel room. He handed me the key. I put it in my pocket. The next day, we added 17 back to the booking system for the first time in almost 8 years. I did not sell it immediately. I blocked 1 extra week for final drying, cleaning, and observation because reopening too quickly would have been another version of the same old habit. When that week passed without a problem, the status changed from out of service to available. The screen looked almost disappointingly normal. 18 rooms on paper, 18 rooms accounted for. For the first time since I took over, the numbers matched. 6 months later, The Prairie Lantern still looked like a motel that had lived a long life. The roadside sign worked again, but I had not replaced it with something flashy. The parking lot still had cracks. 3 rooms had new flooring. Several kept their old brown carpet. We were not suddenly successful. We were stable. Occupancy had improved enough for me to maintain a 3-month operating reserve without moving money from my personal savings. The highway company returned twice for shorter jobs. Several families visiting the hospital arrived after former guests passed along our number. Maya was training 2 part-time housekeepers. Gordon still complained about the maintenance software while using it correctly. More importantly, every out-of-service room now had a reason, a work order, a status, and a review date. We added a deferred maintenance register beside the monthly accounts. Nothing disappeared because it was inconvenient. Harold came by sometimes, always after calling. He had stopped referring to the Prairie Lantern as my motel. I noticed and let it pass. Room 17 was the last room we finished. I did not make it special. Good mattress, fresh paint, new carpet, small desk, 2 reading lamps. A wall I knew had been repaired from the outside in. We installed an electronic lock, so the old brass key no longer opened it. I hung the key on a small hook behind the front desk with the scratched 17 tag facing outward, not as a trophy, as a reminder of the difference between covering a problem and finishing it. Late one February afternoon, snow came down hard enough to soften the motel sign beyond the lobby windows. A woman pulled a navy suitcase through the front door. She looked about 60. "Do you have anything for one night?" "We do." "Maybe 2. "That's fine too." While I entered her information, she said she was supposed to drive to Calgary the next day for a job interview. Then she gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "My marriage ended last month. I'm 61. Apparently, I've decided to make major life decisions late." I looked at her. "I've heard worse plans." That made her smile. I reached for a key card. Room 17 was clean, quiet, and ready. She glanced at the number. 17. "Yes. Is it a good room?" For a moment I looked at the old brass key hanging behind the desk. 8 years closed. Weeks opened and repaired. 6 months becoming ordinary again. Then I looked back at her. "It is now." She rolled her suitcase toward the west wing. A minute later, the booking system refreshed. Room 17 changed from available to occupied. Outside, snow gathered along the edge of the highway. Inside, the motel heater hummed steadily. I picked up my pen and marked the weekly occupancy sheet. 17 occupied.